Thank you. I think the big questions that you raised and it was fascinating for all of us. I mean, not only just me, and I think all of them have benefited tremendously. So, can you see the chat box? Let me just, try and pick up about Pratik's asking about how is India too preoccupied with Iran and it's ignoring the other Arab countries, while China is, of course, making certain great forays. Each one is kind of related. Do you want me to club a few for you?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so that's one. Then I think related to that, Mudassar is asking whether India can remain aloof from the regional geopolitics while it increases its engagement with the region. How far being on the sidelines serves Indian interest? And I think that's something which you also alluded to. Have we moved away from the past links with the Gulf? And what forces to move away?
One at a time.
Okay, so let's do that. Okay.
Which one? The first one was what?
India preoccupied with Iran just now, and is it ignoring the Arab countries like Saudi?
When I argued this yesterday in the Express, I mean, it's really, the government is engaging. The government is dealing daily with what's happening in the Gulf. But I think it's really the foreign policy elite's discourse that makes somehow Iran is so central. Well, actually, no paper, I don't see that any of them covered the UAE space launch. Or unless there is a crisis in the Middle East, we don't pay attention. Unless there's some Indians have to come back looking for support. I mean, we're not paying enough attention as a collective. It's not the problem with the government. I think they're dealing with, in fact, what's a dramatic change in the last few years is the intensity of India's engagement today with the UAE and with the Saudis today on counterterrorism cooperation, on a whole range of issues today. A dramatic change in the actual government policy. What has not changed is the public debate, the elite debate, the academic debate. I think that needs to catch up. So that is where the problem is, and not the governments are dealing with it on a continuous basis. But we've not kept up pace, I think, with the changes. I think there are. If you want to say, for example, on Iran, if you want business, there's more than enough business in the Middle East, in the Arab Middle East. Are we doing enough? So it is. Are we talking about we need Iran because we need business? Then the whole world is open for business. But is business really about proving our friendship to Iran, which is under sanctions? So those are the issues. But I think where we continues to conflate, are we with the Americans or the Iranians? If you frame it like that, you're missing the point, because there are other contradictions between Iran and its neighbors. Iran is under sanctions. As they say in Hindi, North India, if it's raining outside, I mean, you don't wear white clothes and walk into the dirt. This idea somehow India has a responsibility to even invite sanctions to continue with Chabahar. I think that makes India has actually got an exemption from the Americans for the Chabahar and the railway line. It is Iranians who are saying, look, let's have an IRGC company which is sanctioned into the project. So the Iranians can change. I mean, if they change, look, the project will go ahead. But I think we're not, we're trapped in each minor issue gets elevated into an ideological argument. And I think that is part of the problem. But the government is doing things with the Arab side, but we need to do a lot more. As I said, so much is happening in the region. The region is changing. For example, the whole new attempt at moving towards high tech, the creation of a new city in Saudi Arabia called NEOM, the setting up of the new centers of innovation in UAE. Look at the number of universities in UAE, NYU, New York universities there, French universities are there. But here they were begging us to give us an IIM.
Yeah.
And, the Indian HRD made it as if it is a crown jewel, you give it away. I mean, you could have set up an off-campus because most Indians would have used it there. But I think we've not fully, seized the opportunities for what we can do in the region. So
I think that kind of also answers Mudassar's question. So, but I just wanted you to delve on this. Do you see India's competing with China in the region? I mean, how do you see that?
Look, I think China is a new player in the Gulf and the Middle East. Look, we've been around for much longer. So for us, even to put ourselves in a position, we have to compete with the Chinese. I can understand you saying that in East Asia, where China is the natural center of East Asia. And you say, okay, Southeast Asia too, I mean, they're sitting right there. But to talk about competition with them in Gulf, I think, but the fact is today, we didn't take fully the opportunities. They're a player today. They're there. So they've come, but you look, we have our own relationships. We have our own linkages. Build on what you have. You don't need China to do more business with the Gulf. I mean, if you again go back to the British period history, I think you had the Indian Sindhis, Indian, Marwadis, everyone, the whole Indian, trading elite had such deep links with the Middle East. Mr. Ambani and his family, where did they come from? They came from selling oil in Aden. Aden was part of India, of course, till 1937. So that you had these linkages. You don't need China's entry. Oh my God, today Chinese are here, therefore I'm going to compete. But they've been asking you for a long time. So do what you can. You don't need the China factor. There are independent bases for working with them. Just as in South Asia, geography is still closer to us. So we can do more things on our own steam and our own interest and in partnership with our other friends.
Okay, Professor Shravani is asking what is your perception of engagement in the context of geopolitics of the Indo-Pacific? Do you see that evolving?
No, look, Indo-Pacific is the other side. I think today, like all definitions, today it also includes, the east coast of Africa and the Indian Ocean is part of it. But Indo-Pacific is there, but we don't need the Indo-Pacific framework. The Middle East, we've dealt with them through history. So the thing is, look, and even in the Indo-Pacific, those of us who argued for Indo-Pacific, against a lot of resistance, it is divided into a number of sub-regions. So the question is, the Gulf, within the Middle East too, there's Levant, there is the Gulf. So it's not as if everything can be fixed into one framework. So in the Middle East, there's a Gulf. There is other conflicts that are going on in the Mediterranean side. The Middle East extends all the way to North Africa. So there are different sub-regions. So it is how do we relate and engage with them on the basis of our own interests, rather than we don't need to bring the Indo-Pacific into this debate. But on the maritime side, yes, we can work with the French. We are working with them in Western Indian Ocean. Hopefully we do things with the Americans. But French are also present in the Gulf. They have a base in the United Arab Emirates. So there are a whole lot of possibilities, but you don't need the Indo-Pacific framework as a whole to deal with Middle East.
Yeah. Somebody wants to know, how would you list the 3 priority countries for India in the region?
Look, there's no point getting into that. It's really, look, everybody has different, everybody brings different things to the table. For example, in Iran, that is not under sanctions. In Iran, that is in a reasonable engagement with the US, Europe, will be different Iran. We know Shah of Iran, right? But we didn't like Shah of Iran because he was part of Seattle Center, whatever it is. So we didn't like him. He was secular also, but that was because he was part of the RCD, he was part of the Baghdad Pact, that's the collaboration with American alliances. But I think, this idea, so if you go by density, population, if you take those metrics, you have Egypt and Iran stand out big. Turkey, of course, is today going through a phase where the contradictions between India and Turkey have sharpened in the last few years. Their support to brotherhood and their support to Pakistan has acquired a whole new ideological dimension. Previously, it was merely army-to-army type of relationship, so we have problems there. And then UAE, country of 2 million people, but it has huge number of Indian population. And the kind of things you can do there, you can't do in some other countries. So nobody is asking you to choose priorities. Nobody in Middle East is telling you, please don't deal with Iran, don't deal with us, or deal with my... They're not saying, they're saying, do more with me. Each one of them is saying, please do more with me. Why aren't you showing up? Why aren't you visiting? That it took, no prime minister visited between 81 when Indira Gandhi went to UAE and then Modi goes in 2015. Is that reasonable? For 35 years, for no Indian prime minister goes to UAE? Mr. Manmohan Singh, 10 years, 4 visits to the Middle East, out of which 2 were for non-aligned summits, 1 in Iran, 1 in Egypt. And in between 1 trip, 2 trips, maybe once to Qatar and 1 to Saudi and Oman or whatever it is. That is, as they say, 90% of the game is to show up. We were not even showing up in the region. Or our people were showing up in the region, but we were not, the political leaders were not showing up. Because it was treated as some, difficult, complicated place. Let's not get into the... So I think how the game is, if we even appear there, everyone in the region wants to do more with us, and we do what we need to do with everyone.
About the security cooperation, which you also mentioned, there is this talk about India, I think, about being the net provider. I mean, there's a question about how do you think in the post-Galwan phase, do you think there's the credibility has diminished in that context?
No. I see, look, India's had many wars. If every war is diminishing, there's not even a war. This is just one clash. I mean, I don't think it diminishes. Actually, some people say, look, you stood up to the Chinese. I mean, if I'm in Singapore, people say, look, nobody's even willing to, look up the Chinese, but India has fought. So it's really, we shouldn't get too preoccupied with that kind of an analysis. People want help. Those who want help, will get where it comes from. I see, look, Djibouti is saying, look, come, everybody's welcome. You want to pay and get a base. So he's not, the guy who runs Djibouti has no other resource except location. So he's selling the location. So he's not saying, okay, how many people did India lose or how many people did Indian army kill the Chinese? And I think this is our self-referential worries. Look, everybody has problems of their own. They're looking for partners and friends. And I think we should really reach out and meet those wherever it is possible for us.
Do you think Kashmir is an issue in the Middle East policy anymore? Is that relevant?
Look, if we make it an issue, it becomes an issue. Look, everybody, look, OIC Turks will keep raising it. But after all, you had the UAE extend the kind of support which were never expected from a country that was supposed to be pro-Pakistan. So nobody's made a big noise. Nobody's making a big noise, except Turkey and Qatar because of their alliance on the. Nobody else, and this side, Malaysia and the East, no Muslim country. Look, everybody has problems of their own. That it is as if this idea somehow the Middle East is only about religion. I mean, I think it's fundamental misreading of societies, of kingdoms, of countries and their interests. Look, the oil in this market is tanking. Those guys are interested. Look, how do we do our business? What do we do in a post-oil future? There is conflict with Iran. So how do you deal with the Iranian question? Turkey is trying to muscle into the former colonial territories of the Arabs. So Kashmir, we think is only somehow the problem. Pakistan would like to make it that, but I don't think anybody is buying that proposition. Somehow, Kashmir is one issue that keeps everybody awake in the night. It doesn't. So once in a while, if they're compelled to make a statement, they'll make a statement. But how does it matter to us? When they're doing more bilateral business, they're doing more security cooperation. So I think we should focus on that rather than thinking is Kashmir a big issue.
Okay, fine. There are a couple of questions about Turkey. Do you think that this little unstable relation that you also referred to is going to impact India's aspiration there in the region?
Look, Turkey is one player. It's a big region. There are multiple players. It's free for all now. So I don't think. In fact, what it demands is we do more with Egypt. Okay. We do more with Saudis. We do more with UAE. Because they're looking for friends who can help them and not leave it as an internal thing out there. So it actually gives us huge amount of opportunities to engage with the region.
There's a question also with the space program, which you also referred to just now yourself, that why India was not able to partner that. But do you see some more collaboration like this coming up in future? I mean, do you think India is tuning itself there?
No, I think if you go to UAE and see Abu Dhabi, I mean, it's mostly Indians who are running, like in the US, who is running the tech companies? It is Indians, right? I mean, it was IBM, Google or Microsoft. So the Indian manpower is going there. For the first time now, the Chinese companies have showed up in a big way in the last 5 years. WeChat and Tencent, everybody's in the Gulf because they're trying to take advantage. But you have natural advantages. We have not paid attention. Now, tomorrow, for example, when PM went to UAE second time or third time, RuPay card, okay, UAE is the first one to say, look, okay, we're happy to have it here, like Singapore has accepted it. So countries are ready to engage. It's really how much many countries are looking to say, look, the other kind of databases, how do you develop them? How can we use them? There again, it's Indian hesitations that tend to limit what we can do. But on the digital side, sky is the limit. Most countries in the region would want India's help, but we're not able to deliver on the government side. While what happens is really at the company to company or business to business, and if we can facilitate that more, we can. And there's a lot.
Thanks. There are lots of other questions, but I thought I'll just invite Kumar here to come in. I'm sure he wants to add and say a few
No,
things.
no, let others continue. I'll just finish. Let others continue.
Um, Anybody else wants to intervene? Mudassar? I can see Professor Pant also. Mudassar, you
No,
want to
ma'am,
say
thanks.
something?
No, I already had asked my question.
Yeah, which is
Yes,
there, yeah.
already
Okay.
answered, so nothing more. Thanks.
So there's just few 2 minutes, 3-4 minutes left. So in case somebody else wants to from the group ask him something specific, because we've kind of covered more or less. I'm not going to him individually, but I think more or less all the questions seem to be covered with his have been. In his.
If no
Yes,
question.
Pratik, you want to say? Yeah, sure.
So like post COVID, as we do not have financial resources to invest in the Middle East, so how are we going to cope with China in terms of investment? Because it's all a game of investments, sir. So how do we compete? It's not about competing with China, but in order to progress our relations with the Middle East, how are we going to deal with the Middle East part, given the condition that we are, we don't have enough financial resources to invest. So how do you see this game, sir, moving ahead?
Look, I'm not a finance guy, but you talk to some economist type. But Middle East problem, they don't have problem of money. They want technology. They're not saying UAE is not saying bring your money to do space program. He's saying, look, you have the manpower, you have experience. I can put the money. You help me do it. So money is only one part, I think. So it's not really that government of India might have no money, but the Ambanis have money. Your private sector has money. So its question is, can we design policies that will facilitate greater economic cooperation, which is what is needed. They're not looking India to bring money there. Their money is not the problem, at least in the oil-rich countries. In Egypt, yes, they need someone with resources to come and invest there. The Chinese make a big difference with the BRI, building this big Suez. Whole new city, I think, on the Suez, and so that level where you can't compete, but you can partner with other countries. There again, so you don't have to do the same things the Chinese do. There are other areas where you can contribute.
If I can ask a question, can
Sure.
I? Oh, okay.
Yeah, sure.
You mentioned that while the government is engaging with the region at different levels, but the foreign policy community is not looking at the things, or at least they are lagging behind. They are not in keeping in pace with the engagement of the government. How do you explain this? Because this should be normally the other way around. Okay, we should be more following rather than the government taking a secondary step. But at least in the Gulf and the Middle East, it seemed to be other way around. How do you explain this?
No, it's generally been true. If you look at last 30 years where Indian policy was changing, I think a lot of the initiatives have come from the government, and most of the time the think tanks in Delhi, all my friends and colleagues or the universities, like, we say nuclear deal, don't do it, you'll be killed. You vote against Iran in the IAEA, Indian foreign policy is finished. It is end of India's strategic autonomy. It is the death of India's nuclear program. We were actually hyping it up into some kind of a collapse because outsiders actually were resisting change. Are saying, don't do it. Very few times, when Vajpayee did the Srinagar bus, or Manmohan Singh did the Srinagar bus, entire think tanks, say, oh, no, don't do it. The bus will be very bad. Let's not do it. It is the politicians. When Vajpayee, Manmohan Singh, or even Modi going to Pakistan, the political leaders have shown the capacity to say, look, let's find a new way of dealing with the problem. But it's really, where you think there is a red line, where you think actually only this can be done and something else can't be done. So it's look, we are not in positions, we don't make policy. But in fact, we should be freer to say, look, this direction is not good, or that direction is good, or go in this direction, which is better for you. So it's never, very few prescriptions are made, very few analysis. It's always say, don't do it. Don't do anything new, which has been the mantra of the so-called foreign policy community, which stay 3 steps behind the government rather than even getting 1 step ahead of the government. I think So I think I think it's really a problem of the intellectual class of how we think about foreign policy, and that we can do what we want, but I think or too much of constrained by the bigger debates, or is Nehru versus Modi or that kind of stuff, while actually not looking at it operationally. Look, where are we going wrong in the Middle East? Why didn't we do more? Or scholarship, we should go back and look, did India miss something in 1971 when the British were saying they're going to leave east of Suez? And the Indian Ocean, 68, the left started leaving Singapore, many parts of Indian Ocean, gave independence to the Gulf. And our own Maldives got independence in 71. Did we see the consequences correctly? Was there a moment for us to have done with it differently? So I think, we not even forget the think tanks and the policymakers. The university community should at least say, look at the archival work, look at, how did India react to 68, the British withdrawal from east of Suez? When we used to say, great power competition will go and the UN will solve Indian Ocean problem, or Indian Ocean is zone of peace. So were we even intellectually, I think now today you can't undo what we did, but at least you guys like you should be studying and say, look, what happened between 68 and 71? What was the debate in 68 to 71? Or for that matter, today even how we think about 56 in Suez, after all, Nehru and Eisenhower were on the same side. It was Israel, France and Britain who were on the other side. So I think we're not even doing enough of our own past, the complexity of how India thought about the region. So there's a lot of work people like you, scholars, can do in terms of the archival work or the historical contextualization that can actually help think afresh about the region rather than in a standard, stereotypical terms that have become so common.
I think we have crossed the time, but I can see Ambassador Sanjay Singh here, and I think I did see Professor Detail. Would you want to say something?
There's some audio
issue.
I think it's too fast, Sanjay. It's too fast. I think switch off and switch on. You're muted now.
Till he comes back, there's somebody who wants to know about Chabahar and whether that's had an impact on Afghanistan, Central Asia, and India pulling out. How do you see it? You've been writing about it, I think.
Look, I think Chabahar as a port, getting us, stuff into Western Afghanistan is an important thing. But if anybody thinks Chabahar is going to just survive on what India is going to send biscuits and tea into Afghanistan, I think no port can run like that. So and the problem is, look, as long as Iran is under international sanctions, the economic complication is going to go. That if Iran and India want to get across something into the region, it's fine. You can do it, and having a road matters, but the road needs traffic, port needs business. It just can't be done by, drawing lines on the map and saying we have a strategic commonality of interest. And it's not so clear Iran's relationship with the Taliban. It's no longer, after all, one of the guys who was bombed and killed in the border he was coming from Iran. So Iran, being a neighbor, has complicated stakes in Afghanistan. So I think by our experience of the late 90s, when we said we and the Iranians were on the same side, yes, in that period. Would the conditions apply in the next period? We don't know. So we should not objectify that one circumstance, and therefore, but look, there are other people who have influence on Pakistan and Afghanistan. Qatar today is hosting them, for good or bad. You have all said and done, the UAE and the Saudis are still very influential in Pakistan and Afghanistan and with the Taliban. So it's not that Iran is the only factor that's going to help or define the outcomes in Afghanistan. It's not true. We can work with them, great, but right now they're in such messy situation that limits the possibility for everyone, not just for us, for the Chinese, for the world, for the Europeans who are eager to do business with them. So that is their problem, and we can't solve that problem.
So, Ambassador Singh, is it better? Shall we try?
Let me see.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah, yeah,
perfect. Absolutely.
Raja, it's always a pleasure listening to you. You bring a breath of fresh air into our thinking. And I think it's been very useful for all the audience here, especially the young people. Your advice that we should re-examine, re-look at each stage of what we did and why we did it. Because it's very important that the academic community produces work which politicians, government, diplomacy can look at and take forward our policy. So thank you very much. And we can have arguments about how you think about the region and what we did and what we did not. But we can never have arguments that what you said is not interesting. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sanjay. Wonderful seeing you again.
I'll just second that, and I think it was absolutely wonderful. Again, for somebody who doesn't follow the region so closely, the depth that you brought and the large questions that you made me look at, I think it's fascinating. I'm just going to hand this over to the host, Kumar. Will you step in here?
Okay, yeah.
But it was such a privilege to have you here, Professor Mohan.
Thank you, Sridhar.
Thank you, Sridhar. And if